When you're capturing details, lighting that works for a wide shot, for example, may not necessarily work for a close-up, and vice versa. So in these cases, we typically need to make modifications to the lighting anytime when punching in for a close-up. Let me show you a quick example. Here's a scene that I set up for this espresso machine that I modeled from scratch. I used an HDRI to start and chose this creative office space from GSG. I increased the exposure to 1 and dialed back the saturation contribution to 35 just to have some color influence in the scene here, but not too much. I then went to the Coordinates tab and rotated it until I had the light direction that I want. And then I added an area light to act as my main window light. Now, I wanted this light to be dappled light, so I added a gobo texture in the texture slot. This one is called Tree Loop 01 from GSG, and of course, to get the gobo to work in Redshift, I set the spread all the way down to 0. From there, it was just about positioning the light until I got it to a place that I liked. Now, at this point, it's not quite there, because usually these types of spaces have a lot of light bouncing around, so any spot with direct sunlight usually is accompanied with shadows that are decently filled, right? So looking at our example here, the shadows are a bit too dark compared to the highlights, and therefore doesn't look as realistic as it can be, in my opinion at least. So the next thing I added was a large fill card to the right of the scene. And when I preview that, you can see that it fills the shadows in very nicely, even allowing us to see even more detail here in the switch panel and knob area, which is great. And you can simply play with the distance between the fill card and the scene depending on how strong you want that fill light to look. We have nice dappled lighting hitting our scene, and now we want to punch in for some of those details. Here's a shot that I see a lot, especially for espresso pulls. The camera is slightly below countertop level, pointing up directly at the portafilter mesh. The only thing I changed currently is the camera angle, and although this shot may work, I do see some issues with it. Since the focal point of the shot I'd want is right here on the portafilter, this large, bright highlight is grabbing a lot of attention only because it's so bright. So, like I said before, what may work for, let's say, the wide shot doesn't necessarily work for a shot like this, so we need to modify it. Now, when we're punching in for those close-up shots, what I found generally works best is soft lighting. And I'm not saying this works every time, but more often than not, I find myself softening the light for those tight detail shots. So in this case, I added a plane to block the harsh light from the area light, and then increased the exposure on the HDRI. And once I did that, you can now see that the light in this close-up shot is much easier on the eyes. And if I put the shot side by side to our establishing shot, I'd say it works better than if I stuck with the previous version. Very nice. For the next detail shot, I wanted to get a close-up of the wood detail on the switch panel and knob area. So the way the lighting is now, the only thing I changed is the camera angle, and this is what I get currently. This can work, but I don't think that light blocker helps this shot as it helped my previous shot. So I took it out instead and ended up sticking with the harsh light gobo that I had from the beginning, because that highlight is nowhere near as distracting as it was in the previous shot, so I left it in. In fact, the gobo does help give this shot a bit more interest to the shot over our soft light version. So putting these shots together side by side, we at least get a good-looking triptych showcasing the details of our espresso machine in one scene, even though we ended up modifying the light in each shot. All right, well, I hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time. Take care.